Good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I am Tamara Johnson Shealy. Good morning. Whew, it is a crisp Saturday morning, Saturday, February the 20th. Let me see where my trusty co-host is this morning. Let me see, Mr. David. Where is he? Good morning,
Hello.
David.
Hi.
How
How are
are
you?
you?
I'm
Good.
doing good. I'm doing good. Hanging in
Black
there.
History Month, David. I'm still, celebrating. Yeah. How you been? Uh-oh, did he freeze? Uh-oh, David, I think you're frozen. Lord help us.
No. I was actually frozen, physically frozen.
Is it cold
I
over
was
there? Is that why you're
motionless.
freezing?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm still in my earn big money, become a historian T-shirt.
Big money
So,
and being a historian, right, David?
right. Yeah. That's. I'm living high on the hog here.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited this morning, David. Robbie should be joining us in just a bit, but I'm excited this morning. We are. We have a great guest. Lots happening here in Georgia. HR 541, Representative Roger Bruce is here. And I don't want to wait. I want to bring him in.
Yeah,
We're
let's
gonna
do
get this
that.
party started. Let's bring him in. Good morning, Representative Bruce.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm
Welcome.
I'm good. I'm super fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us on this broadcast. Thank you for all the works that you've done here in the great state of Georgia. We are delighted to have you.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So you are in House District 61. Tell us about
Correct.
House District 61.
Yeah, I represent Fulton County, Douglas County, and Cobb County. Pieces of the city of Atlanta, pieces of the city of South Fulton, and pieces of the cities of Douglasville.
Oh, wait, Douglasville, Douglas County. David, you have some research that you've done in his district.
Just a little tidbit. If you're, I'll just take, 45 seconds.
Look like you got somebody else joined us there.
Yeah, Miss Robbie Caban. She is our other co-host for this broadcast. Good morning, Robbie.
Oh, you kept saying Robbie. I didn't know Robbie was a lady. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Pleasure to meet you. I've actually met you before, but David, what's your tidbit?
Douglas County was originally founded in Black Reconstruction, and it's the Douglas that it.
Are you getting ready to talk about that extra S on the name there?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
You know that.
I know about that one. Go ahead.
Well, at the end of Reconstruction, with the white supremacist backlash against Reconstruction terrorism and all of that, the white supremacists knocked the S off the end, and I can't remember who the Douglas is that they named it after, but it was
President of the Confederacy.
Was what it was the president of the Confederacy. I thought it was the vice president of the Confederacy.
It might have been vice president. It was one of them. Something with the Confederacy.
So that's a fraught history, and I'm so glad that you are. I'm not surprised, but I'm very pleased that you're privy to that history. So I'll shut up now.
But just so that you know, we were taking up the idea of adding that S back, and there is a plaque or something that they have in the courthouse reflecting what you just talked about.
Wonderful. Well, I'm all for that. That would be wonderful to get that S on the end there. Would be a real symbolic victory. And draw out that history of a time when African Americans and European Americans working with them were prepared, were dedicating the name of their county to Frederick Douglass. So, it has a lot of deep meaning, I would say.
It does, no doubt about it.
Yeah. All right, project that we can add up on on the list, right?
Works for me.
Yes. So, Representative Bruce, you have introduced HR 541, the Equity and Fairness Commission Act. You want to talk about it? I'm going to let you kind of guide us in this conversation.
Well, we kind of talked about it a few seconds ago, where there's been a history of segregation, history of slavery. And quite often people will say, well, you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But if you don't have any boots, you can't pull yourself up by the bootstraps, right? And if you go back in time, while our ancestors were out in the fields, picking the cotton and doing all of the work that the slaves were doing, unfortunately, the slave owners were sitting up on the patio watching them and drinking sweet tea and earning all the money. And they passed that money on from generation to generation. And what was passed on in our generation was a tendency for dependence. Their thought process was, we provide food, we provide clothing, we provide shelter, and you ought to be happy. And unfortunately, that was what was passed on from generation to generation in the African American community. And over the course of time, we had welfare in all different shapes and forms, but it was still a tendency to push the African American community towards dependency. And what I'm hoping to do with this legislation is to see through study what the real impact of slavery has been on the African American community and what kinds of things we can put in place that will help to bridge those gaps that exist as a result of slavery. You can't solve a problem if you don't admit that the problem ever existed. And unfortunately, whenever we talk about slavery, we talk about things that happened back then, there's a tendency for people to not want to talk about it. And I think part of that is because it's just uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable to talk about how your ancestors mistreated a whole, generation or several generations of people to the point where they took away your name. I'm sure all of you saw the movie Roots, and that was real. The man came over here as Kunta Kinte, and then he became Toby. And, our last names changed, our cultures changed, everything was taken away, even to the point where, if we go back to, over to Africa, and I've been over there, you don't feel comfortable over there either, because they treat you differently because of what has happened with slavery. And, so it's almost like we are, African American people are kind of without a background, we've just been stripped of all of it. You talked about, a second ago about Douglas County with the, they took away that S, indicating that it was named after Frederick Douglass and renamed it after a Confederate person. So I'm just saying we've been stripped of everything. And I think it's time that we get to a point now where we, admit what happened and then do what we need to do to try to balance things out. Did that cover what you wanted?
Go ahead, Robbie. You sitting on pins and needles. I see it.
Robbie, we can't hear you. Unmute.
I'm sorry. Is there a timeline for the study and to implement? The reason I'm asking is because Tamara and I, chat during the week and so on, and we really had a lot of concerns. I'm in real estate about land being bought up and kind of becoming a scarcity. And I was wondering if there was any discussion of maybe municipality-owned land or county-owned land, especially given where Douglas County is and the way that the city of Atlanta is growing. And if there could be a component that was multifaceted, where people maybe not only received, different type of benefits, but maybe a parcel of land.
Well, historically, we always talked about the 40 acres and a mule. Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, I don't want a mule. But so what's today's equivalent, I guess, of the mule? But the reality is that we are not 400 years in the past. So 40 acres and the mule may not be the right compensation, so to speak.
What about a tractor? I'll take a tractor to go with my land.
I think what I'd rather do is look at, and that may be good if you want to be a farmer. Like I said, I don't want to be a farmer. But, what is I hope that if we get this done, that we look at what the compensation should have been back then, for the work that people did out in those fields, and put a dollar value on that, and then take that dollar value and do the math and say, okay, had that money been invested back then to now, what would that be worth? Mm-hmm. What would that dollar value be worth at this particular point? And then somehow divide that up and let people buy. If they want 40 acres and a mule, then buy it. If they want 40 acres and a tractor, then they can buy that. Mm-hmm. Or if they prefer to do something else with whatever it is that they would have earned had their ancestors' wealth been passed on from generation to generation, then, buy whatever it is that you need. But there needs to be something done so that people can ultimately be paid for the labor that their ancestors did in those fields. That's, to me, the bottom line to it. That makes sense?
Definitely. In fact, it's so clear. I'm shocked people continue to, say that once everybody has a living wage and affordable housing and medical, that it'll even out the inequities, specifically racially. I don't follow that argument at all based on exactly what you just said. But you'd be shocked at how many people continue to push that as though it was the same argument.
Yeah, they're looking for simplicity, and I'm looking for equity. And sometimes equity and simplicity are not the same thing. And if you think back over time, they've compensated just about every other group that they've done something crazy to. The Japanese, they got compensated. There's, just about everybody that had issues got compensated. And so we just gotta, admit that it happened, and then be willing to do, and it's gonna be painful, to deal with it. And I'm not sure exactly, what the end solution is going to be, but if we don't start, we can't get to an end. So
it's really unfortunate we've taught our history in schools so skewed, because people wouldn't probably be as confused and misguided if we were a little more honest about our history.
Exactly. Well, history changes depending on who's telling it. Mm-hmm. And I was involved in the creation of the city of South Fulton. I sponsored the legislation that allowed the city to come into existence. And it's amazing to me I was there from the beginning to the end. I mean, in fact, I think I'm the only person that was there from the beginning to the end. Others, some came and left, and new people came on, and we went through all kinds of things to create this city. And I didn't do it by myself. I'm not trying to imply that I did, but I was there from the beginning to the end. So nobody can come and tell me what happened, because I know what happened. I was there. And but it's amazing to me every time I sit in a room and I hear people tell the story about the city of South Fulton, and I hear people talk about how the role that they played, and I'm like, no, that. And but I'm sure you've been a party or witness to things where what happened, and the story that people tell is different than what really happened. So history, as I said, it changes depending on who's telling it.
Well, and it's probably why these discussions, especially one so critical that's overdue, like reparation, is such a challenge for, I guess, Caucasian people, because if it wasn't, it seems to be an emotional component instead of just recognizing the reality of what occurred historically and, servicing the debt along with the compounding interest. This is wage theft, along with punitive damages. It's such a clear legal argument. I'm hoping that, there's a timeline and that the legislation goes through and is executed. I do hope it's multifaceted, because what I'm seeing is a lot of the affordable housing discussions. But affordable housing is making money for developers, even churches, nonprofits, and it's all apartments. There's no wealth creation at all in that.
Exactly. And what's interesting, right now, the federal government is looking at trying to come up with ways to help people during the pandemic, and that's good. But they're talking about spending, billions and billions and billions of dollars. And I'm saying do the same thing, for the victims of slavery. Just figure out what it costs, and let's get a starting point. And if it is that the country, can't afford or whatever, I don't believe it can't, but even if you came up with, okay, we're gonna, and I'm not saying this is the final thing, but if they just say, okay, if you're African American, you don't have to pay taxes for the next 20 years, something like that. That is a way to compensate, for what took place. Or if they say, if you're African American and you are of college age, we're gonna cover your college expenses, and you don't have to, do that. And I mean, I'm just saying there are ways to do it in order to get people to a point of being equal. And if they guarantee every African American a college education, since that seems to be a requirement to get a decent job. Or, if they say, okay, we will fund a startup, if you have a business that you want to start up, that, here's money to get started. I mean, I'm just saying, whatever it is, let's figure it out.
And it could be an option where people elect, it doesn't have to be one thing. It could be if you want, lands and a source to service it, or if you want a college education, or if you want a cash payout. Maybe people elect, what they prefer. Or
that's what I say. And that's what I'm saying, come up with, 4 or 5 different methods. Like if you told me I didn't have to pay taxes anymore, I'm okay.
Well, I hope it is quick, because to your point, I live in Atlanta and I try to follow everything, and I was heavily involved in the community. And what has happened in Atlanta that I witnessed is that all the lower income people who are predominantly Black have been pushed out, ironically affecting counties like yours, Douglas County, South Fulton, Clayton, Henry, McDonough, et cetera. And I've seen a lot of articles now that Henry County and I believe McDonough, Clayton County have blocked out the ability for developments for single family homes that are rent to own. And so in essence, the people that are being punished the most with that would be the lower income and predominantly Black people who have been pushed out, who are can't purchase, who are trying to better themselves in wealth creation through home ownership. But now that has been outlawed in 2 entire counties on the South Side.
Yeah.
So the consequences of, what one municipality in a city does, continues to do, affects, outreach, South Georgia, the state as a whole. So this is very time sensitive. Time is of the essence with this.
Yeah. Well, I can't put a timeline on it. Obviously we want to get it through. But in all candor, again, everybody has not accepted that the issues that we're talking about exist. And I'm looking at what's going on in the General Assembly right now, with all the legislation that's been introduced to try to take us back 40, 50 years as it relates to voting. When I'm not feeling like that there's a sympathetic group of people in this current General Assembly. But again, you have to start somewhere. And I don't want to be in a situation where they say, well, nobody asked for it, so we didn't do anything. So we're going to take that argument away because we're asking for it. We're asking them to look at what happened and to come up with remedies for that. So you just have to wait and see. I'm one of those that believes if you don't ask, you won't get. So,
is there any discussion of highlighting who's not sympathetic, just to put pressure on those people?
Well, that's a false theory that it would put pressure. People have to have a conscience in order for you to put pressure on them. And we've got some people down there that absolutely have no conscience. And it doesn't take much to see it. But what we have to do is figure out what does put pressure on them. And in most instances, these people want to get reelected. So the pressure has to come from their district. If 100 people from my district goes over to one of these legislators that I'm talking about, then they don't care. That's 100 people that can't vote for them. They don't care. But you get 100 people from their district going to talk to them, then that'll be a different approach. Mm-hmm. And I think we have to learn the strategy. People who are in elective office want to stay in that office. Not, some do, but the motivation is to get reelected. So if you put them in a posture, it's not so much of embarrassment, but of pressure because people who can vote for them are saying, we're not going to vote for you if you don't do what's right in this regard. That's the pressure that you got to put on them.
Yeah. And you hitting that nail right on the head. And I applaud you. This legislation is, when I say it's just right on time, it is just right on time. So I applaud you, Representative Roger Bruce, for bringing this forth, because I'm going to share my screen because I want to show everybody what part of this legislation actually says. Let me share my screen. You're going to create a commission that includes 11 members who are citizens of this state and shall be appointed as follows. 3 members appointed by the governor, one of whom the governor shall select as chairperson, 2 members appointed by the president of the Senate, 2 members appointed by the minority leader of the Senate, 2 members appointed by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and 2 members appointed by the minority leader of the House of Representatives. So this is an opportunity. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.
Okay, can you go back to that for a second, because you left out the most important part of that.
Let me go back. Uh-oh, wait, doing something crazy, 1 second. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the most important piece of that, because we don't know who the governor is going to be. We don't know who, going to be the Speaker of the House. We don't know any of that stuff. But if you go down to the next line, all members shall be appointed from persons recommended by organizations. That's the important part, because the organizations that dealt with civil rights or deal with civil rights, they will make the recommendations to all of those people. And that way we hope to assure that we get people appointed that have a background and a knowledge of and an acceptance of what took place over the course of time.
Mm-hmm. I just think this is just timely legislation. You know, Georgia is ripe. I ran for the U.S. Senate, and that was a part of my agenda where I talked very openly and very boldly about reparations. Reparations, the bigger picture, is a federal initiative. However, Georgia taking, you know, a first step. To me, this is just a first step. We're having the conversation. You know, nothing is in stone that says we have to do this or we have to do that. Let's create this table and have this conversation. So I just applaud you, Representative Bruce, for taking such a bold stand right here in the great state of Georgia.
Yep, glad to do it.
Mm-hmm. There's some questions in the chat. He says, Mr. Bruce, do you think not paying taxes will close the lineage wealth gap?
I think it would help. You know, if that's not going to work for everybody, because everybody doesn't have a job yet. Okay, everybody's not working, so not paying taxes on no income doesn't help you any at all. But if you are working and you have a job, you know, to the point that we were making with Robbie, is that one solution is not going to be applicable for everybody's situation. But in my case, with the amount of taxes that I pay, if I didn't have to pay those taxes, I'd be fine. You know, you pay, you know, some people pay, you know, 25, 30, 35% of their income in taxes. If I could take that money and invest it and do other stuff with it, I'd be just fine. And my children and their children would be just fine. But if you're unemployed or if you don't make a lot of money, then that may not be the right solution or the right, you know, compensation for you. So that's why we have to come up with different forms of compensation so that everybody is taken care of.
This brings up something that I've heard people who counter the reparations argument, where they said that there's, you know, different economics in, you know, ADOS. Some people are doing well, some people are doing horribly economically. So is part of the study, you know, maybe a staggered system, or that if someone doesn't want reparations who is ADOS, they can put it back in a pool? That seemed to calm the gentleman who was telling me he wasn't for reparations. He kind of asked me, he's like, well, what about Andy Young's kids? Is Andy Young's kids going to get reparations, meaning they don't need reparations, which is kind of not the point. But what do you think of that?
I again, you know, who is he to say they don't need it? If they had the benefit of their ancestors' labor, you know, being the compensation that they would have earned being passed down from generation to generation, who knows what they would be doing now? You know, what would be their financial status now? And just because they're the child of Andy Young, so what? You know, I don't understand that logic at all. You know, when you say they don't need it, we're not talking about what was needed. We're talking about what was earned.
And owed. How about an owed to them? Yeah,
and owed to them. You know, I like I said, the solution of not paying taxes is not a solution for everyone. Owning property is not the solution for everyone, because some people, you know, if I had 40 acres, what would I do with it? You know, I'm not going to be a farmer. I don't need to live on 40 acres of land. You know, I can take that 40 acres and build me a subdivision or some other, you know, real estate investment, and then earn money from that. You know, so that's what probably I would do if my only choice was the 40 acres. I wouldn't live on 40 acres, but I would probably develop things that I could generate wealth with from those other acres. Live on one and do something with the other 39.
Mm-hmm. David?
Well, I have a couple of thoughts. One of which is that that this is virtually what the GI Bill did for overwhelmingly white veterans after World War II. It gave them options of going to college or getting small business loans, and the way that the Mississippi Congressman John Rankin, who was the chair of the committee that set it up, established it. It was not that the government handed out this money; it was that they guaranteed private banks loans. They gave loan guarantees, so that the whole GI Bill was financed by private banks, and since there was no anti-discrimination legislation, Black people were virtually cut out of the GI Bill. So, in spite of the fact that there were a significant number of African American veterans, they just didn't get the compensation or the return. Also, we got incredible increase in power in the banks and the developers and the real estate industry from that, which didn't help the whites, very, very much either. And so, and also started this white by design suburbs that ended up becoming the bastion for Republican reaction. So I guess what I'm saying here is that you might even discuss this whole issue in very much the same terms. I mean, there were young men who went into the military during World War II, who spent several or 2 or more years of their lives when they were essentially working for free, as soldiers. And this was compensation in effect, repairing the loss of their income while they were doing something, of service to the country. So it certainly seems to me that you could use the same logic when it comes to the whole period of hereditary chattel bond servitude, since it built the country, and the labor of the folks who were involved in the unpaid labor. So that's just one thought I have. The other thing, I mean, if you want to jump in, please feel free, Mr. Bruce. I mean, I think your knowledge about this, I don't know whether this is just talking off the top of my head. But the other thing is that I wonder how we are going to put pressure on lawmakers in Georgia who see their constituencies as being, implacably opposed to the idea of even examining this issue, and what kind of pressure can be put on them, in the context of this
David, I don't know if I want, as an advocate, and Robbie, you can jump in here before Representative Bruce kind of answers. As an advocate, and here's a question in the chat. He says, Sister Tamara, your platform when you ran must have been received in different communities. What was the feedback you received while campaigning? I don't want to use the word pressure. I think from an advocacy perspective, I think there's a lot of education that needs to happen around reparations and what that means in Georgia's role in chattel slavery. I want, as an advocate, I don't want to pressure, I want to educate. And I think I want to take a different approach. And that's why I'm so excited about this legislation that he has, because I'm ready to get on the ground and just push and fight and but not fight in a way where we're fighting for something, but really bringing people in to what this is and why this is important. And if there is some resolve there, if something comes of this, and there's monies that's going to be given to the descendants of chattel slavery here in Georgia, whatever comes, it will be a benefit to Georgia's economy. It's not like people will take this and put it in their back pockets and sit on it and do nothing with it. This is going to benefit all of us here in Georgia. Robbie? Oh,
you're mute.
I'm sorry. I take notes when we're chatting, and I don't want the back feed so I keep muting myself. But I think you and David are on the same page in terms of education and strategy. I hear you about not wanting to be adversarial, because ultimately, we all need to back this and get it done quickly, as soon as possible. In fact, I think there was a comment that there were prior studies, and I'm hoping that the commission will, instead of redoing a whole study, or at least take from the old and add on to it to maybe speed things up. I agree with you, Tamara, the education component. People are so visual. I'm hoping that there'll be videos, since we don't teach history correctly, instead of making people read what is probably very technical, videos, kind of reparations 101, explaining to people, even giving like a very short condensed history so that they aren't so anti. Their maybe white fragility or guilt or some, can be tapped into to say, no, this isn't about you. This is about these people, what occurred, what needs to be remedied, what is owed. Maybe we can even be strategic in using, not using words like given, because I don't know, people hear that and like, what more do you want? Affirmative action and the backlash. Being someone who's very light-skinned, I'm in circles sometimes where, the feedback I got from my friends, and what about Andy Young's kid? And this is not a man who is not intelligent, who's not educated, who isn't involved in politics. This is what he felt comfortable telling me. So I do hope as well that the ripple effect of the monies that you're talking about, Tamara, and that there'll be literal numbers like, okay, if these people are given this option, and this option, out of 5 options, 3 are selected, that the money's reinvested back into the American economy will be this, which is in turn good for everyone. Mm-hmm. That may be, strategic.
Yeah. Representative Bruce, will you answer the question? What was the reaction of your colleagues when you asked for co-sponsors?
Everybody that I asked, except one person who I'm not going to shout them out, but everybody agreed to sign it. And the contents of them signing it was all of the things that we just said. Why not find, first of all, admit what happened, find out what the impact was, and then find out what is the best way to make things equal. And to Robbie's point, she couldn't have said it better. The reality is that this is going to benefit everyone. I'm kind of like with you guys. I don't want to call it, make it a fight. I do want to make it. Now, I mean, if I got to make it a fight, that's okay. But the reality is that this would be better if people saw it for, okay, well, I can benefit from this too. If I make this equal, now this person can, do business with me. One of the things that, was really interesting to me, Maynard Jackson and I were very good friends. And there was, I think I told you about the movie. It's on Netflix right now. It's called Maynard. And if you haven't seen it, go on Netflix and look it up. I'm in it too. But anyway, but one of the things that he did that was always fascinating to me, it was 2 things actually. There was a meeting of bankers And at the time, this was in the 70s, there were no African Americans on the board of any bank in Atlanta. And he, basically was saying what we're saying now. In order for the banks to really understand the needs of the African American community, you got to have some Black people on your board so that policies can be made to compensate for some of the discrepancies that exist. And these bankers told him, well, you're not going to tell me who's going to be on the board of my bank. And he said, okay, fine. And he had people on his staff. He just told them, he said, as of Monday, take all of the money out of those banks that don't have Black people on their board. And guess what happened? There were some Black people put on those boards. And I knew 3 of the 4, it was 4 of them. And I knew 3 of the 4 personally that ended up on the boards of those banks. And then the policies changed and the way the banks did business changed. And that's what we have to do. Those banks figured out, well, okay, now we're going to get more accounts opened up because we got more Black people doing business with the bank. And, if we make loans to Black companies, then the money that those Black companies make could end up in our bank. So we have to show people that by doing the right thing, you help yourself. There was another instance when the airport was being built, and Maynard insisted, I think it was 32% of every contract had to go to a Black business or a woman-owned business, and it was time to lay the pipe for the airport. And the white business owner that had the contract told Maynard that he couldn't find any Black people that were in the piping business. That he looked all over the country, couldn't find anybody in the piping business, and so he couldn't comply. Maynard picked up the phone and he called this guy that he knew, and he said, how would you like to be in the piping business? The guy said, I don't know anything about piping. He said, you don't have to. You own the company and you hire people that know about piping. The guy became a millionaire overnight. So we got to get people who are committed to the cause and committed to fixing the problems that were put in place because of slavery, put in place because of discrimination and all of the other things that held people in bondage in a different way. When I was growing up, part of the welfare system was that if there was a man living in the household, that family could not get welfare benefits. So what ended up happening is a lot of the men weren't there. And, so you have, like I said, a history of all kinds of things, all kinds of policies that were put in place that caused Black families not to be able to pass wealth and education and everything else on from generation to generation. For my age group, and I don't know how old, tell me your name again, I'm sorry.
David.
I'm not sure how old David is. He looked like we might be around the same age. But, you probably grew up in the same environment, where families were separated intentionally. And Black people were, Black men were not raised by fathers. And most of us were the first to be able to ever go to college, much less graduate from it. We were the first to go. And so there's a lot of history that is not that old. We still have people living right now that were victims of policies that kept us down. And now they're trying to put new policies in place to take us back there. When Donald Trump ran for president, he kept saying that, he wanted to make America great again. And I kept asking myself, what did that mean? When in his mind was America great to where he wanted us to go back to that? And all I kept thinking is he wanted to go back to the 30s, 40s, and 50s, where it was not, where it was apparent that it was not, equity was not the issue or the value. It was, the white America and a black America were two separate things, and one was subordinate to the other. And I think that's what he was calling, let's go back to when America was great. Obviously, I don't want to go back to that. And so I'm going to do everything I can to avoid us having to go back to that.
I mean, I guess the only people who would be, I'm assuming there's a teeny portion of ADOS that maybe don't want reparations, but other than that, who would be against it, and how would that strategic?
When you say who, you're talking about who in terms of black people would be against it?
Demographic. Who, I don't, granted, my pool is probably a little more limited, but who is against this?
Oh my gosh, Robbie, you didn't see the HR 40 hearings this past week.
No, okay.
Yes, Herschel Walker. I stopped watching after him because Herschel Walker was totally against reparations. This man, I saw a broadcast from one of my colleagues, Angela, just put out a broadcast with the reparationists, how Herschel Walker is worth $12 million. And he's telling us, he don't understand, why we need reparations. And he even went back to Representative Bruce's, what he just said about the black men and fatherless homes and, not being married, and it's our fault. Basically, some black people feel like it's our own fault that these things have happened to us. And going back to what Representative Bruce said in the very beginning, he said, boots, how are we going to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps? We don't have no boots or no straps. So there's a lot of people, a lot of black people, and most of them are very elite black people. There's a class of black people that, look down upon the rest of us, Robbie.
Yeah, and it's sad, you take a guy like Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker did not make his money because he's intelligent. He made his money.
Again, Representative Bruce.
Huh?
I say that again. It is not his brain; it was his body.
Yeah, he was able to play football, and that's that's what got him rich. And it's unfortunate, but there's some people who figure, I made it myself. I've done it, so now you do it. And I'm like, no, it don't work that way. If you give everybody, from birth, the same flat starting point, then that would be fine. But that's not what happens. You don't get to control where you're born, who you're born to, where you live, all of that stuff. All of that is society creating an environment where you can or maybe can be successful. But it also creates an environment for some where you just can't. And, even back down to there were periods of time where your zip code, pretty much determined what happened to you in life. It's sad, but it's real. And like I said, until we get people to admit that these things have happened and continue to happen today, we're not going to be able to fix them if people don't even admit that it exists.
Well, I think from a Latin perspective, I have folks who are from the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, other folks who are from South America. I definitely, when I speak to family about it, I relate it to Puerto Rico and the colonization, even though obviously chattel slavery was a very, different scenario. But even today, if Puerto Rico becomes a state, all the resources have already been occupied. There's still laws like the Jones Act that basically leaves the island, in continuous servitude. People really don't own anything, and it wouldn't be equitable at all. So to understand it, in different, it's not a difficult, history to understand. I really am. I'm still shocked that we're, especially with other countries, issuing truth and reconciliation, doing some sort of reparations on multi-levels. That we really could just mirror and.
Yeah. I'm laughing because somebody just put up on the screen that Herschel Walker played football when the helmets weren't thick enough. Something to
I think it would hit it on the head, Mr. Bruce, when you said some people make it and just think, well, maybe it's like a fear component, like a distancing. I made it, you can make it. I have family like that, who believe that.
But none of these people made it without somebody helping them along.
Mm-hmm.
And, I have a colleague, I laugh at him because he says this all the time, but, he's saying, if you have a fence and, and you're trying to get over that fence, you can't get over that. If you're a turtle, you can't get over that fence without somebody helping you.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's my colleague's line. He uses it all the time, but it's true. All of us have to, come to grips with what happened in the past and how do we help each other going forward. And like I said, if you give me, the equivalent of 40 acres and a mule from back then, you give me the equivalent of that now, I would probably take that and invest it in such a way that I could probably bring 4 or 5 of my colleagues along with me, definitely my own children. So we just got to get to a point where we recognize there was a problem. We have an opportunity to fix it. Let's do it.
Yeah, my response to that, is to say that that the system by which the elites, almost overwhelmingly white, run this country is on the basis of separate and unequal, and that social control system is has been in place since the late 17th century, when the first invention of the white race took place as a social control formation. And if we run around in a circle here, it seems to me, if we say, well, yes, this would benefit everybody by raising the wealth of the American descendants of chattel slavery. And you're quite right about that, but that's not the goal of the ruling elite in this country. The goal of the ruling elite is to, first of all, concentrate the wealth in their own hands, and secondly, make sure that the rest of us are not only fighting each other, but fighting each other in a way that gives European American working people an illusion that they have a stake in the system. So the idea that these districts that have almost guaranteed Republican what do you call it, guarantee Republican elected officials that will keep getting reelected over and over again on the basis of appealing to white supremacy. I think we really need to think about how we're going to, through education and links and connections with folks in those districts, how we're going to be able to undermine the positions, the attitudes that European Americans, working people, have towards the idea of giving what they would see as welfare to Black folks.
So, David, let me jump in right there. I don't think undermine is a tactic that we will be able to use, because I don't think, once some of these people are just rooted in the way they think and the way they feel. We're not going to ever change their minds. What I'd like to see us do as advocates and how we get behind this legislation and really push this to get passed here in Georgia is to overwhelm them. I think if we create enough energy and synergy, and we just get out here and really push and educate and really continue to have this kind of conversation, I think we can it'll be enough of us that will overshadow and overwhelm those that we can't undermine.
Yeah. Well, and I think it also goes to just showing people, we talked about history earlier, and we have to show people, what the real side of history is. And I think back, and I didn't notice until I saw the movie. You probably saw it about the four women that actually were the ones that saved the space program.
Hidden Figures.
Hidden Figures, I think was the name of it. Was that it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
And nobody knew that story until that movie came out. Very few people knew that story. And they filmed that at my alma mater. They filmed that at Morehouse. And but if you think, people had a different attitude about the space program after they saw that movie. And I think it's the same thing. We have to show people that Black people, African American people, have contributed to this society in very positive ways. Those four women saved the lives of those white men that were in outer space. If they had not come up with the right calculation, that daggone spaceship would still be floating around out there. And so you have that. There was another movie that came out, I can't remember the name of it, where they were talking about some of these vaccines that were created, and some of them were created by Black doctors. They didn't get credit for it, though. The white doctors got credit for the work that Black doctors did. And that was a movie, too. We found out a bunch of stuff in the movies, but I just think we have to do things to make sure that we know what the history, the contribution of Black people have been to this country. And if we educate people on that, we say if you give them the resources, they could do even more. And the country can grow and the country can prosper as a result of not holding any portion of our population back based on the color of their skin.
Now that would be making America great.
Yes, it would. That would, Robbie. What a way to come in there, Robbie.
Well, I'm behind you, so let us know what you need. I mean, maybe we can work on some marketing videos, educational marketing videos, and be very.
We need to educate people. We need to take all of those pieces of history that we know, just like was pointed out about Douglasville. I knew about that. I represent the area. I'm supposed to know about it, but there's a lot of people who don't know about it. Mm-hmm. And so we need to educate people about those things. And I think, we are comfortable. All of us have probably been in a room at some point where people they'd be talking about your relatives or your ancestors as if you weren't even sitting there. And they don't see you because you have been successful and you have been able to, build yourself up somewhat. But they talk about everybody else in front of you as if you are not part of that. Did you say you were from Puerto Rico?
My dad's side is, yeah.
Your dad, okay. So you know exactly what I'm talking about. There are people that will talk to you about Puerto Rico as if you have nothing to do with Puerto Rico.
Well, I totally relate when you said when you go to Africa, because I was born in the U.S. So native Puerto Ricans don't really think
they look at you a little different.
Yeah.
But we just have to figure out how do we get rid of all of that and show what reality is, mm-hmm. and make sure that people understand, like I said, what the contributions were. Those four women saved the lives of white folks that were in outer space. Mm-hmm. The polio vaccine was a Black doctor that came up with the cure for that. And, so we just got to show, if you give people a chance to grow and develop and to be all that they can be, so to speak, that benefits everybody. Mm-hmm. And the world will just be a better place, as they say.
And safer.
Yeah.
Wouldn't need all of the additional costs, a lot of them. we may not need the kind of affordable housing costs we have if we put people where they have resources to build on their own.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, I'm curious. Is there any discussion on like the immigration component? I see a lot of that. There's a lot of kind of infighting with.
We haven't talked about that, and that's not part of this bill. But if you really think about it, it's kind of funny. If you weren't born here as a Native American Indian, then you came here some other kind of way. Some of us came here voluntarily. Some of us didn't. Okay. But if you were not, like I said, a Native Indian American here, then you are an immigrant or a descendant of an immigrant, so when you see these people talking about my country, this ain't your country. You came here just like everybody else.
Yeah. Representative Bruce, I want to thank you for joining us on this broadcast. I am excited about this legislation. I am excited. I see it. I think Georgia is ready. I think this is the opportune time to, reach across the aisle. I think we're going to have more Republican support than we know. So I'm excited about that. I'm encouraged. But I want to thank you. And as we're going to talk more about what we can do as activists and advocates on what we can do to help, because I am 100% in. This is totally my thing right here. So I'm excited. David, this was a great broadcast, sir.
Thank you, Representative Bruce. Appreciate it.
Glad to do it.
Yeah.
And if there are other opportunities, if you guys represent, other organizations that have these types of meetings, I'll be glad to participate in those as well. I'll be honest with you, I'm not out at groups that much right now until we get this virus under control, but I'll be happy to participate in any, electronic activity or outdoor activities. I'll come to some of those, where we're kind of separate, which is real hard because I like hugging.
Representative Bruce, we're about to get you. You're going to be real busy here in just a little while.
And I'm okay with that. That helps me stay young.
Yes. We're about to push this. We're about to push this really hard. You can find Mr. David Slavin right here on Facebook at Acknowledge the Divide. You can find the beautiful Miss Robbie Caban at robbiecaban.com. You can find me, Tamara Johnson Shealy, at tamarashealy.com. And every week we give voice to issues and activists and activism. You can cash app us, y'all. We're trying to grow this broadcast. We have some big plans at the Tamara for Georgia. Mr. Roger Bruce, thank you again. HB541 Equity and Fairness Commission Act. We will definitely have you back on this broadcast real soon, sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right. And if I could just give a shout out to my friend Rodney Littles, who worked with me to put this together. Mm-hmm. Again, like I said, I don't want to be seen as, the sole person doing this. There are others that think this is a good idea, like Rodney, and I want to give them credit for helping put everything together.
Yeah, and you actually have some co-sponsors on this legislation too. Yes. Let's just give them a shout out. I want to recognize those that put their name on this bill with you, Representative Roger Bruce, Representative James Beverly over in 143rd District, Representative William Bodie, 62nd District, Representative Derek Jackson, 64th District, Representative Erica Thomas, 39th, and Ms. Deborah Bazemore, representative over in the 63rd. Thank you.
Those are the ones that are visible on the bill, but there are about 15 more.
Awesome. You're gonna have to get those names to us so we can let people know that their representatives are on the right side of history.
All right.
Yeah. And the 100,000 people that voted for you, Tamara, because you ran on a reparations platform outward. So clearly 100,000 Georgians over are for reparations.
Yeah. This conversation and this movement and this bill, sir, I don't think it's going to take till next year to get it passed. I think we can do this session right here and right now. And that's what I'm going to work on, sir.
All right.
We're going to work on Robbie and David.
Okay.
All righty. Thank you. Have a great week, everybody. This broadcast is on fire. Come back next week. Trust me, we got more great stuff to bring you. Have a great week, everybody.